The following program was produced by an independent community producer. The opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect those of the ECAT staff or board of directors.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of Joyful Pouring with April. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I have such a fun technique we're going to learn. If you haven't seen the first 2 episodes, you can go back and watch them on YouTube, on ECAT's YouTube page, and I've also posted them on my YouTube and Instagram page. So I wanted to first show you what we did last time. So last time we talked about consistency of paints. We talked about thin consistencies, medium, and thick consistencies. And so I brought the 3 paintings that I did on the last episode, and I wanted to show you how they looked dried. So we did a ring pour, if you remember, which meant we layered the paints in a cup and then poured them onto the canvas. This was the one that was a thin pour, and you can see that the colors all kind of blended together. It made little wavy lines, and this was the very thin paint. And then we move on to the medium consistency paints. And again, you actually have very crisp lines here, but you can see a little bit of a waviness in the paints, and they blended just a small amount. And then this is the thick paint, and you can see how really crisp all the lines are and how the paint stayed just as it was poured. It didn't blend together as it dried. So these are good examples of paint consistency with the same technique and how different they come out. Today, we're gonna do one of my favorite paintings, and it's called a Dutch pour. And the reason it's called a Dutch pour is that in 2016, a Dutch artist named Rinska Duna coined the term. She decided that she wanted to try to find a better way of mixing paints other than using paint mediums. She wanted to find a less expensive way to mix her paints. So she decided to mix her paints with water and thin them out that way. Water can be a great paint medium to thin it out, but you have to be careful of a couple things. The first thing you really need to be careful of, or there's 2 factors you need to consider. One is the density of your paint, and one is the opacity of your paint and the quality of your paint. So paint quality matters when you're mixing with water. Paint is made up of pigments. The more pigmented your paint is, the higher quality they are, and the more opaque they are. If you mix lower quality paints, such as craft paints, with water, it breaks up the pigment and causes cracking in your final painting. Paint density is the weight of your paint or the thickness of your paint. So it's usually measured in grams or ounces. The heavier the paint, the more pigmented it is. And so the more pigmented it is, then you get into your opacity of your paint, which is how see-through your paint is. The more dense, the more opaque, the less see-through. Opaque means you can't see through it at all. Transparent is you can see through your paint to the underlayers. So when you're doing a painting where you're layering different paints, you want to be careful how you layer them. Because if you put opaque paints above transparent paints, you're not going to see those transparent paints. You're only going to see the opaque paint, and the transparent will be completely covered up. So this type of painting that I'm doing is done with very, very thin paints. So the consistency is like water. And I can show you an example here of one of the colors. It's very, very thin when you mix it, and then when you lift it up, it runs right off the spoon like water. And that's very, very thin. You want all of your paints to be the exact same consistency. So, as I mentioned before, grab my little consistency chart. You put a dot on each, a dot of each color here, and then lift it up and see how fast they move. I'm gonna do that for you real quick to see how thin these paints are. I'm only gonna put a couple dots. I'm not gonna do all the paints, but I just want you to see how fast they move. Now, it's okay if they have a slightly different consistency, as long as they both all move at the same speed. So I have 3 dots here. I'm gonna lift them up and you'll see how fast they move. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pretty fast. And you can see here that the purple paint actually may be a little thinner than the blue and the white, but they all moved at the same speed. It could also be that I just put a larger dot of the purple on. So it just moved a little bit longer and faster. But in this particular technique, you want extremely thin paints. And the reason you do is because this technique is done using a blow dryer. And the paints will not move with the blow dryer if they are thick. Also, you want your colors to blend together. They won't blend together if they're thick. As we saw with our consistency experiment, thick paints stay in their own lines. They stay very crisp. They don't blend. Let's paint. Let's get started. So this painting, I made some custom colors. This purple here is a custom color. I just mixed some blue, some lavender, some white to get this like kind of bluish lavender color. This is going to be our base color, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then I've got a blue, a white. This is called brilliant blue. And then this is a very, very dark blue. It's called Prussian blue. I've got a custom-made magenta. I just took this darker magenta and mixed it with some white to make it a little bit less red. And then I have silver, and again, super, super thin. Now, we talked about opacity of paints, meaning how much you can see through them. So I have a few different opacities here. The blue, you can tell on the tube what it is. So the blue has this solid block. That means it's opaque, meaning you cannot see through it when it's on. And then the silver kind of has a half and half, and that means it's semi-opaque. It means you can see through it a little bit, but not a lot. And then we've got our magenta here that has an empty square, and that means it's completely transparent. So when I'm layering these paints, I want to think about, okay, I don't want the blue that's opaque to be on top, because then it's going to cover all of my colors. So that one is going to be the first color that I put down. And then my more transparent ones will be the last colors that I put down so that we can see through them. And I'm going to start by putting a base layer on and covering the whole canvas so that the sides will be completely covered when we're finished. I'll start with my purple. And when I put this on, you can see how thin it is. See how it just kind of, it's like water. And I want to put a lot of it because I want my paints to flow well. And I'll go right to the edge and cover the edges as best I can here. One thing I love about thin paints is that they are very easy to work with. They flow well. They cover your canvas well. Now I made sure with this base color that I used an opaque paint so that it will cover the canvas and you won't see the canvas through the painting once it's dry. It's super important that your base coat is opaque, unless you want some of the canvas to show, but I mean, typically people don't. Okay, so we've got that completely covered, and I do still have a lot of paint on the top, which is fine. I want that because I want the paint to flow as we do this. Okay, so now I'm going to start with my blue because that's the most opaque. And I'm just going to put just a puddle in the middle here. Just make sure this is still, yeah, we're good. So just a nice puddle. And then my white is also opaque, so that's going to go next. I'm going to go in next with the Prussian blue. This is a very dark blue, kind of like a navy blue. And then my magenta. I feel like we're tilting here. And then I've got my silver on top here. Now you can see the paints are already mixing a little bit, but that's okay because that's what we want to happen. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to blow these out, and I'm just going to do a simple flower. There's many different ways that you can do a Dutch pour. Today I'm just going to do a simple flower for you, show you that technique, but there's also, you can do waves, you can do floral blowouts. Anytime you're blowing out paints with a blow dryer that are really thin, it's a Dutch pour, okay? Or some people just call it a hair dryer pour. I'm gonna let you in on a secret. This is the very first time that I have used this blow dryer. So we will see how it goes. I did bring my old, well-loved blow dryer. You can see it's covered in paint, just in case this one doesn't work. I'm also going to put a little bit more of the base coat around just to make sure we flow well here. You always want to have a little bit of your base coat left over because you want to be able to cover any sides that didn't get covered, or if you need to redo something, scrape it off and redo it, you want to have some of your base coat available. All right, this is a pretty big puddle in the middle, so this flower might extend over the edges, and that's okay because we're just learning. I am by no means an expert at this technique. I just love to do it. All right, here we go. First time with this dryer, so we'll see how this works. I have it on a low setting and I have it on cool. Oh, I think it's going to be too powerful. All right, I'm going to switch to my trusty little one. All right, here we go. I know how this one works. See how the paints flow and blend? We're going to go down to low because I don't want them to go as fast as they were going. Here we go. That's what we want to see, the blending. You want to see them come into, kind of looks like a flower petal. Actually going to go back to this one here. There we go. Bring this one out a little more. You can see the blue come through because the other colors are transparent. Now, like I said, I'm by no means an expert at this, so I might look a little wonky, but it is very fun to do and to experiment with. And you can see how nice the paints move, and this is, like I said, on a low setting. On the high setting, it kind of really blended them more, but the problem is you don't have a lot of control on a high setting. Okay, these colors are so fantastic together. The way the magenta and the blue they just look so pretty. Now I'm just trying to stretch these petals out a little bit more, and I'm actually going to end up spinning it, but not until I make a little definition here in the petals. So I'm just going to take my finger and I'm just going to draw like a little line here to bring the petals in, to make them a little bit more defined. And then there's areas where I could blow it out a little more, like right here where there's this blue that didn't blow out. I'm actually going to use my mouth and just blow it out. There we go. And that's usually where I get my hair in the paint. All right, I'm gonna do this. And I'll just go around and blow it out in places I feel like it needs to be blown out. Bring my petals in. Sometimes you have more control with your mouth than you do with the blow dryer. Okay, so now we've kind of got a little flower going on here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to spin it because that will spread it equally instead of just going one petal at a time. But before I do that, I am going to blow out a few more little segments here, like right here. And over here. And it's okay if the base color shows through. It adds another layer of dimension there. And remember, this is your painting. You can use whatever base colors you want. You can use whatever colors you want. It's all about just your creativity and how you want to do this. I'm just trying to make some little cleaned up lines here. We've got a little bit of a paint in the middle. I like to keep some negative space and not just have all the paints blended together. What I want to do is bring this pink up through. Oh, that's good enough. Okay, I'm going to spin this. And not super, super fast because I don't want the paint to just go off. I'm only going to spin it a little bit and kind of see what it does. Now it looks like, see how it kind of spreads off here? I might not even need to spin it again because that really kind of brought a lot of the paint off. I do have quite a bit of paint here, so I'm going to mouth blow that piece off. And then I think I'll leave it as is. This technique is much easier to do with a bigger canvas because you make your, I feel like I probably made my petals a little too big in the middle here, which is why the flower is so big. But if you use a bigger canvas, you can make your petals like I did. Probably should have used smaller petals, but every painting is a learning experience. And now I know when I use a 12 by 12, make smaller petals, and then it'll be a little bit more defined. But I love these colors. This actually looks really pretty the way it is. I'm gonna blow this off the edge here, just so there's not like a ridge, because there's a lot of paint. There we go. And if you want to define your petals a little bit more once you've blown it out, I mean, that's okay. And then right here, the colors kind of got into the purple. There's not the negative space there. So I'm actually going to take a little bit of purple and kind of drip it in there to make that negative space. And then what I'm going to do is just blow it right off the canvas there and separate those petals. There we go. Now we've got a little bit more definition in there. Perfect. All right. Now I know it doesn't look like any flower you've ever seen before, but again, that is what makes this so cool. Is that you can't duplicate anything. The paint does what it wants, the colors blend the way that they want, and you're just along for the ride. And that's why fluid art is so great. So I'm gonna leave this as is because I actually really like it, and I'm gonna see how it dries. After it dries, I can do little touch-ups. I can take the same color paint and a paintbrush and really get in there and define some of the petals and add some more colors in areas where I feel like it needs more color, like right here is just blue, but I might want to add some of that silver and some of the magenta. So I would go in there with a paintbrush and just kind of define it a little bit more. Here we've got some solid magenta. I might bring some blue through there with a paintbrush. So you can continue to tweak it even after it's dry. The wet part of it, this part that you do, is the beginning. And then you can always change it once it's dry. Get in there with a brush and fix the little details that you don't like. But that's a start. That's a basic Dutch pour. And I was so excited to share this with you today because it is my favorite. If you are interested in seeing more of my work, I have a Facebook page, an Instagram page, a YouTube channel. I also have more art up at the Easton Art Co-op at 50 Main Street. So happy painting, and I hope you enjoyed this episode.